Did you ever wonder what could have been with the AWA had things gone differently? Had their fortunes gone differently? Had certain wrestlers not left and perhaps more money would have been at the disposal of the Gagnes? Well, wonder no further. You can go to Brad Drake's YouTube channel and experience the 1987 Supermod for yourself, as Brad Drake starts off in May 1987 along with Greg Gagne, Baron von Raschke, Vern Gagne himself, Nick Bockwinkel, Larry Zbyszko, Kurt Hennig, and a slew of others as he plays and saves the AWA.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the Talk of Wrestling. We are on here today because of you, viewers and watchers like you. In order to continue the podcast, we need to monetize our YouTube channel so we can get guests on that require financial compensation. That's where viewers like you come in. If you subscribe today, we can get that number up to 1,000. And as an incentive, the 1,000 subscriber will receive a free t-shirt just like this and receive a book from the legendary George Shire on his Minnesota Golden Age of Wrestling, from Vern Gagne to the Road Warriors, signed by George Shire himself. So please get on there, tell your friends to subscribe today. And when you hit that 1,000 mark, you're going to get a t-shirt like this. I'm going to reach out to you. You're going to be coming on the show as a guest and receive that book, The Minnesota's Golden Age of Wrestling, from Vern Gagne to the Road Warriors, signed by George Shire. So get on there today, subscribe, and please enjoy the podcast. Thank you for joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the Talk of Wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. My guest today is known in the ring as Attila Khan. He has worked with some of the greats, including Harley Race, Haku, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., Abdullah the Butcher, and many others. He is currently working for Herb Simmons in the Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dennis McHawes. Dennis, thanks for coming on today.
Brian, thanks for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this for a long time. You know, I first saw you in the ring last summer in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
When you were doing an event for Mid-States Wrestling, Space Cowboy Jason Jones' promotion. And I loved it because it felt so real. It felt so like old school. And then when we met each other in at the CAC reunion in Vegas, and we actually talked for a while, it was just wonderful. And I'm so glad I was able to finally get you on here to do this podcast. And so thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. I mean, it's great because you know, Attila and Dennis are two very different people, and there's not a lot of opportunity for Dennis. You know, Attila never speaks, and so Dennis always tries to take a back seat as well. So when there's an opportunity to get out and you know, talk about wrestling and what all is going on, and some of the great things I've got to see through the years, I love to do it.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you coming on. It's been I've been waiting for it. I know you had a event this past weekend.
Yes.
Yes. Just north of St. Louis there.
Yeah, we were in East Crown.
Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this past weekend, we actually ran our last house show at the East Carondelet Community Center. Herb's been running there for years. With special, you know, we travel around and take SICW to other locations, and we usually do a couple big events at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds. And then every month we would do our house show and television taping there in East Carondelet. And so crowds are growing, things are growing. So we've decided starting in February, we're going to run out at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds where we do the big shows every couple times a year. It's going to a lot larger area to draw from, and going to give us a bigger area to work in. And it's going to, we're really looking forward to it. But yeah, we this past weekend, full house. It was great. About 30 minutes before the show, we come in and they said we need more chairs, and so that's always a good thing. And about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after the show had already started, Andy comes back and said they're still walking in and we're out of chairs. So we got people standing down the aisles. So it was good. We had a great card from top to bottom. Kevin Sullivan was in, Andrew Anderson was in. He was just had done your show recently. And the main event of the night, it was a 6-man tag, Devastation Incorporated, against Gary Jackson, Big Texan, Bobby D. And I don't want to give away what the finish was, but it was exciting, and there's some great things to come. So but it was a great way to say goodbye to the small community center and get ready for the next beginning for SICW.
That's wonderful to hear that you guys are growing and are able to expand and knowingly, have a vision for that, because sometimes, and I know Herb's been doing this a long time, so he kind of knows when to expand and when not to. He's been doing this for quite a few years, so I know, but sometimes you grow too fast and then it kind of doesn't do so well. But I know Herb, he's a smart man.
There's no wild guesses. They're all measured decisions. I can tell you that.
Yeah. And I'm so excited. Also, in May, you got the Bruiser Brody Memorial. I'm looking forward to that. You got some great stars coming in for that, from what I've seen.
Yeah, as of right now, I think he has about 13 legends booked. Not sure how many he has announced yet. He's announced quite a few of them, but there's things being added almost every day to that. It'd be a full wrestling card that evening. A huge fan fest that day. The St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame is going to be there. There'll be vendors there. There'll be all the legends there. It will be it'll be one heck of an event. There's a lot of work going into it, and it's great because we got people already calling, reserving tickets and groups of tickets, and how do I get my tickets? So it's good. I think it'll be a huge event.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm probably going to be there. I'll have to, thank goodness that's only a few hours drive. So, because, the next day is Mother's Day. So, you got to be back for Mother's Day, family and everything. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, really excited about it. Let's get back to you, sir. Let's talk about how you got started, kind of your childhood a little bit, if we could, growing up, getting into, what you did as a kid, and then kind of getting into the business.
Sure. I grew up about 30 miles south of St. Louis. It's a small town by the name of Herculaneum. And so if you grew up, in that St. Louis region, and was a kid in the 70s and 80s, a part of life was wrestling at the Chase. Larry Matisick was the voice of your childhood. You had Jack Buck announcing the Cardinals. You had Larry Matisick announcing pro wrestling. And that was like the two sounds of your childhood. So I grew up watching wrestling at the Chase, Bruiser Brody, my absolute hero growing up. And, as I've become good friends with Barbara and Gail, Frank's sister, through the years. And I tell Barbara, I always say, I have to watch it. I said, because I'm going to embarrass myself. I said, I'm a grown man. I got almost 30 years in the wrestling business. But when I talk about Bruiser Brody, I revert back to like a 10-year-old kid. I mean, he was the quintessential wrestler for me. And, that was my first exposure to people like Harley Race, Ric Flair, Dick the Bruiser, Pat O'Connor, just on and on. I mean, because St. Louis used to, that was kind of the thing. And Kevin Sullivan talked about it this weekend. You knew that you'd made it in the business when you wrestled in St. Louis. This was the Mecca. So as I got a little bit older and, I was heavily involved in athletics and played football and baseball. Friend of the family introduced us to Pat O'Connor, and Pat became a very close personal friend of the family, to the point that we did holidays together. I got Thanksgiving dinner pictures. We got Pat O'Connor in the pictures, and and that resulted in getting tickets to almost all the events in St. Louis, and getting to sit up close. And on those special occasions, Pat would take us to the locker room, and kayfabe was still very strong in those days, but he would take me to the back, and there's actually a picture of me and Harley Race, and my little brother's in it too.
Okay.
I'm a young teenager, and Harley Race is the champion, and I'm standing there, and we got a picture together.
Wow.
And that picture actually hung in his office until he passed away. So it's probably
Wow.
still there at the world, WLW office somewhere. And that was one of the things, is that later on, as I will get into, going to work for Harley, that I brought back up to him.
Yeah.
Like I said, growing up, being a huge wrestling fan, knowing Pat O'Connor, it was just really, wrestling has been a part of who I am.
Yeah.
Either as a fan or, in the business. I'm starting my 29th year.
Wow. Congratulations.
My entire life.
That's amazing.
It's always, I've wrestled, that's 4 decades that I can check off that I've been in the business.
Yeah.
And so, I graduated high school. I was in the Marine Corps. I'm a Desert Storm veteran, a Marine Corps infantryman, combat veteran. Did my 4 years, came back to Missouri, and it was that summer, my dad and my brother were heading to a St. Louis Cardinal baseball game. We drive by South Broadway Athletic Club, and they got on the marquee, it says pro wrestling here, this Saturday or whatever. I said, man, I haven't been able to go to a wrestling show, for the last 4 years, because I've been in the Marine Corps, I've been deployed, I've been all over the world, and so we went, and we were sitting there, and I'm watching it, and I look over at my dad, and I said, I can do this. And he said, you've lost your mind, which, looking back, he was accurate in that. I mean, that was a very good, you got to be crazy to want to do it. And something Haku and I just talked about recently. None of us are right. There's just some that's farther over, than the others. But so anyway, as I sat there and watched the show, I saw one of the wrestlers come out, and he was going into the bar to get a beer. It was Dump Truck Dave Perry, a local guy. And I walked up to him, and I said, hey, and it's something that anybody that's been in the business for any amount of time has heard a jillion times. I walked up and said, hey, I want to be a wrestler. And he says, okay, all right, sure. Show up here on this night, and they'll talk to you. And that was kind of how it started. He gave me the directions to the training gym, and Herb Simmons was involved with MMWA at the time as well, and was through all those years. So Herb actually goes back to my very first days in the business. We've been friends for 29 years.
Wow.
And just I think the world of him. He's always treated me like absolute gold. He's always been honest, which the wrestling business sometimes just, it gets a little jaded at times, and get into some, some people are just not. But
right.
So I showed up, to start training, and one of the first guys that I saw was a wrestler by the name of Johnny Jet. And he was a good guy. I didn't even know about babies and heels. I didn't know what that meant or any of that. I just knew he was a good guy because I just seen him.
Yeah.
And he was like an absolute jerk, right? I walk up to him, and I'm like, hey, I'm here to wrestle. And he's like, okay. And it was just like these real short answers. And I was like, man, this guy's just a jerk, But I didn't realize at the time how the business was, and it was still protected at that time. Some things that started to leak out or whatever, but it was still protected. And this guy didn't know me from, Adam walking up saying that. And, so went in, made the initial contacts, and training started. They sent me home the first night. They're like, okay, now I'll go home. I got all what I thought I needed with me. And all they did was talk to me and send me home. They said, come back tomorrow, trying to make it as inconvenient as possible.
Yeah.
And so I come back the next night, and then for the next several weeks and months, They literally just beat the hell out of me. I can't describe it any other way. And you would run the ropes until you just had black stripes on your back where you were bruised, and you do flat back bump after bump after bump after bump, and it was torture. I mean, but I just got out of the Marine Corps and I had that mentality. I was like, there's no way I'm going to let them break me, right? Now, I've played the game with the best of them. I can play the game with these guys. And I can remember getting aggravated because I was like, one of these nights I'm going to lose my cool and I'm going to smack the crap out of one of these guys because I'm tired of coming to get my ass kicked multiple nights a week. So after several weeks went by, I walk in one night and they look at me and they said, now we're going to teach you to work. I'm like, what do you mean teach me to work? What are you talking about? They hadn't even opened up the lingo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they started really training me. And honestly, from that point on, I've been one of the most fortunate people, in this business.
Do you ever wonder what would happen if
you give a dad a podcast?
I'm what you call a nerdy fan. I nerd out at this stuff hardcore.
You'll hear me talk about anime on here. You'll hear me talk about Power Rangers. You'll hear me talk about wrestling on here.
Okay.
I had a axe handle with a Twisted Tea on it. It was right after that Twisted Tea video went viral. And man, they went out and grabbed it and smacked a dude in the head with it. It was so... That's great.
I'd like to think of this podcast as a nostalgia moment for me. It's a show where I can talk about whatever I want.
I'm a human and animal chiropractor. There was a picture of me. It looked like I was on the side of a ramen box over in China. But
So I took my kids with me to Comic-Con.
I thought that was really cool.
Well, I don't know if my wife should listen to this podcast. We'll cut that part out. You hope. Be like, and then Robert said this.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast. Available now on all podcasting platforms.
Funny story about the first guy that I met that I really wanted to smack when I got there. I ended up being the best man in his wedding. He was one of my very best friends. He's just we're extremely close. We ended up being tag team partners for years. Traveled together, roomed together, and but on the side note of that, we'd been friends for about 9 months, and somebody called him by his real name, and I go, "That's your name?" He never even told me what his name was, and I'm like, just beside the work name. So it was, people kept as much protection around it as they could. But that's how the St. Louis side of it started, getting into the business, and ended up traveling around the Midwest predominantly for there at the beginning. And then we got a call that they were starting a new company, and it was World Legion Wrestling. It was predecessor to World League Wrestling. Carl Lauer was involved, Dave Marquette, and got a call. They handpicked guys from out of the Midwest and all over. And then there was some pretty direct communication with some of the bigger companies at the time, so we were using a lot of their people as well. And that was one of those kind of the first time I thought, man, I've made it. You're walking in and I'm scheduled to work with the Iron Sheik, and then I got Butch Reed later, and I got this guy, and names like that. And man, it was going good. And as the wrestling world does, it shocks you sometimes. About several months into it, you get a call and say, "Hey, it's over. They shut down."
Wow.
So, I was like, what do you mean we shut down? And
Yeah.
like I said, Harley had been involved with the company, and one of the first times I saw him, I went up and shared the story about growing up with O'Connor and the picture. So, trying to get it in, right? Trying to find a common ground,
Yeah.
and then also not to completely mark out, because it was Harley Race. I mean,
Right.
In my opinion, definitely one of the faces on the Rushmore of wrestling.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And so, after it shut down, there was kind of that deflation. You're just like, oh man, that was probably the best chance I was going to get. And a couple months passed, and my phone rings. Because when still everybody had, regular phones in their house instead of in their pocket, and I pick up the phone, and it's Harley Race on the other end. And he said, I'm starting a company. It's going to be World League Wrestling, and I want you to come work for me. And I said, absolutely. I'm there. And that was the beginning of a friendship that lasted until Harley Race passed away. And actually that period, I made friendships that have lasted my entire life. Just Steve Fender, superstar Steve. I remember the first day he walked in. He was the I want to be a wrestler guy.
Yeah.
Trevor Murdoch. Trevor used to ride with me to shows before he was old enough to have a driver's license in the state of Missouri.
Wow.
Not a wrestling license, but a driver's license to get to the show. Haku. Though he's one of my biggest rival, that's the big battle every year, is with Haku. But I developed a relationship with him that I wouldn't trade for anything. The Barbarian is another one. And there were just so many friendships and opportunities that came during that time frame with Harley. Just I wouldn't trade for anything. And probably there's no probably to it. The relationship that I established with him, we became very close to the point that if they were coming to this side of the state, they would stay here at our home with my wife and family. Harley and BJ'd stay here, and we would stay at their house, and we'd go down to the lake to go out on the boat with them. And usually anytime if we were traveling, with WLW, I would drive to his house, park my vehicle, ride with him, and come back, stay at his house, ride to the next show. I tell everybody, it's like, I knew how to wrestle when I got there. I knew how to do a match, obtained a PhD in wrestling, from Harley Race, that you can't put a price tag on it.
Yeah, he was one of the greats, no doubt. I remember a story with him. I went to one of his shows, 2012, I want to say, in Springfield. First one I ever went to. He was sitting in the truck. I had his action figure on in a bag. I was going to have him sign it, and I will walk past that truck. And I
didn't call it a doll, did you?
No, I said action figure. But
okay, because he would have got you.
Yeah, I know. I walked past and I just pointed to the truck and I told my wife, "Hey, that's Harley Race." And I didn't want to bug him, so we just kept walking. He rolled down his window and asked me to come over to his truck. He asked me my name and I told him, and he goes, "What do you got in the bag?" I said, "Well, it's an action figure." I said, "But I'll wait till you're inside. I don't want to bother you. This is, I know you got a lot of stuff going on." And he goes, "Oh, go. I'll sign it right now. Here, hand it to me." I hand it to him. I hand him a marker.
Mm-hmm.
He signed it 8 times. World champion, Harley Race. Handed it back to me, and I said, "Thank you very much." And just a world-class guy. Just very down to earth, and yeah.
I can tell. Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience. That, like I said, the off time, not at wrestling shows that we spent together, but the personal time, friendship, going to the boat, love to gamble. Him and BJ love to gamble. You'd be sitting there playing cards at the table.
Yeah.
And inevitably the crowd would start to gather because somebody would recognize who it was. And then you'd start hearing the whispers. And I've never seen him turn anyone away. There was one night they were staying here at the house, and we went locally for dinner. And I was sitting at the dinner table, and guy walks up. I mean, right in the middle of the dinner. and says, Harley Race. He said, and he told him what he meant to him and all the things. This guy was a huge wrestling fan. And Harley talked to him, shook his hand, signed an autograph, and talked as long as the guy wanted to talk, right? And then when the guy finally walked away, I asked Harley, I said, does that ever bother you? That because I by this point, him and I had been many places together, and it happened every time, and I said, does that ever bother you? And he said, it'll bother me when they stop. And I went, got it. And that was one of those, that is one of those life lessons. That's one of those pro wrestling lessons that, that you write down and go from the words of Harley Race. Because, I mean, that's the thing, guys that want a big shot people or don't have time to talk to people or whatever. Guess what, guys? Unless those people come through that door, unless those people support our product, you're nobody. I mean, you're going to be a wrestler at your house, No, you're
right.
We're there because of the people. And so, I mean, it's just, and that's why I say those little things that you learned about the business and about life and about carrying yourself from being around Harley. It was one of those, he didn't have to give you, hey, this is a life lesson, write it down. All you had to do was watch him and just follow his lead, and you were going to learn.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about him. I know he's got some crazy stories about his driving, like you said, but as far as a mentor and a person to learn from, I've heard a lot of stories about that. But mentorship and guiding you the right way, no doubt. Heck of a guy.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely, 100%. And the stories about the driving, it's true.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. We are on here today because of you, viewers and watchers like you. In order to continue the podcast, we need to monetize our YouTube channel so we can get guests on that require financial compensation. That's where viewers like you come in. If you subscribe today, we can get that number up to 1,000. And as an incentive, the 1,000th subscriber will receive a free t-shirt just like this and receive a book from the legendary George Shire on his Minnesota Golden Age of Wrestling, from Vern Gagne to the Road Warriors, signed by George Shire himself. So please get on there, tell your friends to subscribe today. And when you hit that 1,000 mark, you're going to get a t-shirt like this. I'm going to reach out to you. You're going to be coming on the show as a guest and receive that book, The Minnesota's Golden Age of Wrestling, from Vern Gagne to the Road Warriors, signed by George Shire. So get on there today, subscribe, and please enjoy the podcast.
100%. Quick story on that. We're in Rolla, Missouri one night, and so we did a show in Rolla, and then the next day we were in Springfield. What is that? An hour and a half drive?
An hour and a half, 2 hours, depending.
From Rolla to Springfield.
Yeah.
Well, so that there was a blizzard that night. There was a whiteout, and it was one of those where even the tow trucks were wrecked. And so it took me, and my brother was with me, took almost 8 hours to get from Rolla to Springfield. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Well, about halfway through that trip, this minivan blows by me like it's 70. Like we're doing like 7, and here comes this van like 70. Whoosh. And I told my brother, I said, you'll see this idiot dead up here in the ditch. I said, this is going to be bad. So we get to Springfield, get to the hotel, and at my room. And as I'm walking in my room, I look at my brother. I said, there's that van. That's that van that passed us out there. And he goes, I wonder where he's staying at. And I said, who knows? Knock on the door. I call Harley and I say, hey, where you at? I'm going to come down to your room. And he's like, down here. I go down, and the van's parked right outside the room. And I go, were you driving that? He goes, yeah, why? I go, because you passed me like we were driving in July. It's crazy. I mean, I can't even, unless you experienced it, it's hard to describe what it was like in the passenger seat as he drove.
Yeah, I know. I've heard stories. Dennis, if we could, you worked not just in Southern Illinois. You worked in World League Wrestling, World Legion. Have you ever been a part of a WWE or any other big show? I mean, some guys are like fill-ins sometimes. Have you ever done anything like that?
Mhm. So besides,
Yeah.
you know, those the local ones there, wrestled all over Arkansas, all over Tennessee, Oklahoma,
Okay.
Illinois, Iowa, um, you know, that area. But when we worked for Harley, we would get called to come in and do dark matches. So I had a handful of those. You
Okay.
know, I say a handful of matches, handful of bookings. So got to do a Monday Night Raw here in St. Louis.
Okay.
Was booked for SmackDown in Kansas City. Me and Trevor were booked matches. The way it worked at that time, and
Mhm.
I don't know if it's still the same. I assume that it probably is they'll contact you know people in the area or whatever, and especially with Harley, and they'd book you. And sometimes you'd show up and you'd go have a match. You know, it was great. I got to do one in St. Louis. You know, walk down on a Monday. You know, see yourself up on the Titantron and the whole bit. It was great.
Yeah.
You know, and then you know the Monday Night Raw that Trevor and I were booked for down in Jonesboro. We're sitting there and waiting to see, you know, who we were going to work with that evening or whatever. Randy Orton walked by, and I've known Randy since he was literally in high school because I'd wrestled his dad countless times.
Mhm.
And Randy recognized me. Hey, you know, he said, "Hey, you know, how you doing? Good to see you, Denny." And he said, "I got two buddies I want you to meet." It was Brock Lesnar and Batista. They were all
Oh,
up
wow.
at OVW at the time,
Mhm.
and so they brought him over and introduced me to him, and because they brought in the OVW guys who at the time was kind of like the I don't want to say the farm system for the WWE, but I mean those were the guys that were looking at for developmental contracts and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So you were in there as an uncontracted person.
Right.
So if anybody else showed up or they brought in, you know, like there's always a plethora of talent that's there that to
Mhm.
fill in for whatever they may need or whatever may arise. But I mean, you go through catering, you still get all the everything just like you work, you still get paid, you know, and you get the same amount. And so
Yeah.
it was always good, you know, anytime that they would call. And it was, you know, I always liken it to you know, kind of Alice in Wonderland, you know, getting to step through that and see what it was like. And, you
That's
know, it
cool.
was, and Larry Matisick and Harley Race both told me we talked and they said, you know, you had bad timing. And I said, what do you mean I had bad timing? You know, that's timing's everything in wrestling. You know, and they're like, no, we're talking about your age. And, you know,
Oh.
come along in 1994, the territory days weren't completely dead, but they were on the final stages of hospice at that point, you
Yeah.
know, and then, you know, Harley brought in um, some representatives from WCW and had tryouts with them. And they were like, man, like what you do, we want to talk to you. Same thing, developmental deal. And Vince buys WCW, you know, and it was kind of, you know, ECW had been during that era. And so it
Yeah.
was like every time you got close, you know, the door got shut because why would you pay me money to develop me when you just picked up 100 established people, you
Yeah.
know? And so that's what they meant by the timing. You know, we came in, I look at myself and Gary Jackson and Ron Powers, you know, some guys from this area here that got to go and do so many things and in
Yeah.
so many places with, you know, that was the thing. I would spend all weekend working with these guys, and on Monday night they would be on television. You know, so
Yeah.
I'd still be in Missouri, and they'd be wherever. You know, and it was just one of those. You know, fell in the middle there, and it made it very. It was very frustrating
Yeah.
because I had actually walked away from the business for a period of time in the early 2000s. Really, at that point, I'd become so frustrated with it because it was like
Yeah.
you continuously chased the carrot and you were never going to get it, you
Yeah.
know. And but for the opportunities, the first time I got, it was WWF at the time, the first time I got to work for them, Harley calls me. I'd worked midnight shift. I was a police officer. He wakes me up, and he's like, "Are you sleeping?" And I'm like, "Harley, you know I work midnight." It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. Yes, I'm still sleeping, And he's like, WWF's in town on Monday. This is like on a Thursday. And he says, you want to work? And in the fogginess of sleeping, I was thinking, they said, you want to go? Just wanting to know if I wanted to go to the show, because a lot of times him and BJ and me and my wife would go with them, and we'd go in and talk to all the boys. And I said, yeah, good. Click. And he didn't say, do you want to go? He said, do you want to work? And, so now I'm wide awake. And about 5 minutes after that, the phone rings, and it's BJ. It's Harley's wife. And she's like, we thought you'd be a little bit more excited than that. I said, I just realized what you actually said to me. I said, yes, I'm extremely excited, and I'm extremely, thank you. And the match went good. I mean, had a good match. Got to confront Sergeant Slaughter at the time, because I was the drill instructor. And as soon as after they played a rib with the Undertaker on me, as soon as I walked through the door, because you got to be there early in the afternoon, and I walk in, and I see some of the boys. Like I said, I knew most of them because they travel. They would come out and work for Harley, and we made connections. And walk in, they're like, first of all, they're saying, hey, Slaughter, your boy's here and all this, because I'm doing this Marine DI, and they said locker room's in here. And so I opened this door up, and I'm in a room that is like the size of a broom closet times 2. And there sits the Undertaker, and he stands up, and it's it's his personal locker room, right? And he sticks his hand out, and he says, Mark Galloway, the Undertaker. And I said, Dennis McHawes, the drill instructor, like, whatever. He said, you're welcome to stay. He goes, let me guess, all the boys sent you in here? I said, yeah. And he says, you're about the 8th guy they've done that to. And I said, well, they got me too. He goes, well, you can stay. And I'm like, no, thanks. And then I had the talk with Slaughter. He asked me, he's like, do you use the name Slaughter? And I said, no. And he says, were you a Marine? I said, yeah, I'm a combat veteran. I'm a Marine. And he said, well, I'm going to watch you. Went out and had my match at night, and he came back. And it was great because it was in St. Louis, and I was known in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like the typical dark mag I was known in. That's where I started at. And so I got a good reaction. And when I came back to the curtain, he's like, fantastic, use the gimmick. And I said, well, if I can have half the success you did, I'll be pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, those times of getting to go do those things, I mean, it was fantastic, and it's one of those, not everybody gets to do that. There isn't, that isn't just a very common thing for people to do. I mean, it's kind of like getting, I always say I got to go up and pitch 1 inning for the Cardinals. It was kind of, I got to go in and do it, and it just,
yeah.
If I could have been about 10 years younger or 10 years older, it'd been a whole different story, maybe, but that was it was a wrestling. It was great because it was a high point in wrestling at the time, because wrestling, there's peaks and valleys with the business. And during that time, I mean, wrestling was hot. I mean, it was, it was such a fun, and you're kind of seeing that again now. Wrestling's hot again. And it's a fun business. It's a fun business to be in.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Dennis, because, I think for a lot of the years, all the indie shows that are coming back, you guys, Mid-States, it's coming back. It's rolling. It's great to see that. And it's wonderful that recognition, those indies are now starting to get back where they need to be. So
no, it really is. The internet, social media, has helped with that. As much as I feel that it's hurt the business in a lot of ways, I guess it's the old, crusty veteran in me there, but it's helped a lot too, because there's a whole another market that's out there that now is exposed.
Yeah.
If this was 25 years ago when I first started to see it, whether it's Missouri, Illinois, Arkansas, Tennessee, what have you. Now, like when I go to CAC, I got out of the taxi this year, or the Uber from the airport, stepped out, and a guy was standing right there, and he goes, I've been waiting for you. He said, I was too scared to ask for your autograph last year, but I'm asking this year. And this guy was from Canada. And he says, I watch SICW every Sunday night, and that's what I try to take back, to the locker room at SICW, and we encourage everybody to go. I said, there's people all over they're watching you. They're following what we do. And it's, I don't know, the territory days will never come back. I don't think the way that the territory days were in the past. It's what you're seeing. It's kind of a new version of those territory days. And when you get guys like Herb Simmons, Jason Jones, Austin Bayless up in Iowa, I up and work for Austin. You draw a circle at the area, and those guys can run once a month, every 15 minutes from home. They're traveling around, and I mean, that's basically a territory, and I'm tickled to death, even though I'm getting into the sunset of however long this will last for me. It's great to see.
Yeah, 100% agree. I really think it's rejuvenated in the last, I'd say, especially 4 or 5 years. With the internet, I think you were right when you said it was kind of a curse. But now I think with how you do it too, if you put on a good product, they're gonna watch. They're gonna come out and watch you. They're gonna watch it on TV, if it's on TV or it's on YouTube or whatever. They're gonna watch it. And that's, when I saw you guys last year down at Springfield, and I had already met her before, but I started watching it more, your guys' product, Jason's product, and it's so good. It really is. And I wish, and hopefully this will get out, I'll put all the links and stuff down there. It's so good. You guys put on such a good program and wrestling card that it's not like the days where it looked like it was in a I don't want to be mean here, but like a carnival. You know what I mean? It's actually a show. It's actually a card. You actually look like you want to beat the crap out of your opponent. You don't. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the way it used to be. You guys, you come out of the you come across, when you come out of the curtain, you're Attila Khan. You go in there, you scratch his face up or whatever you're doing, and it's I just can't describe it. I just feel like I'm back when I was a little kid in the or a teenager in the 80s, watching old school NWA, AWA, all that, and that's what it feels like again. That's why I think people are coming back to it, because it feels like that again. Hello, everyone. This is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I want to tell you about a new podcast out called Fouls Count Anywhere. It is a classic pro wrestling podcast that brings you the legends of wrestling with true wrestling fans Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. They bring on guests that are legends in this business, as well as wrestlers of today, promoters, referees, you name it. They have them on there, folks. And I encourage you to listen to them. If you're on YouTube, watch them.
They drop every Saturday. They have their podcast. And they drop it in the afternoon. So look forward to that podcast coming out. Falls Count Anywhere podcast with Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. Folks, you will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. And enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That was, the people that are, from our age, our demographic, we grew up watching, that 70s and 80s, like you said, the NWA. I mean, when Harley Race went to the ring, man, you could tell that guy was tougher than nails, right? I mean, you just knew he was tough. You look at a Bruiser Brody, in my mind, that's what a professional wrestler looks like. I mean, here was this beast. The first match I ever saw live was Bruiser Brody versus Ric Flair at the Checker Dome in St. Louis. And that was I was 11 years old. And I'll never forget, that's the night I said, I want to be a pro wrestler. That was the first time I said, that's what I want to do. And I want to look like Brody. I want to be that guy. And I think it's, and I'm not going to bash any of the new product today. I'll just don't watch. I don't personally watch the new product.
Yeah.
You'll find me on YouTube watching classic wrestling, pulling up Wrestling at the Chase and Memphis Wrestling and some of the 80s stuff when the guys would go to Japan with those, Brody and Hanson matches and stuff like that. And I mean, and the business was so guarded then. I always say that there's a place in the wrestling business for everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody is going to be an in-ring performer. Right. And we've gotten to a point where, in my opinion, it's too easy to get into the business. And I think it's watered down the product in a lot of areas. I'm still very protective of, of that, of the level of that. And I mean, but I do think that's why we're seeing that resurgence. I think people, they miss what we miss what we grew up on.
Yeah. Totally agree. I mean, you think about it. I mean, now it's coming back to where it's you feel like it's legit, like you actually cannot stand your opponent. It's not just you're in the ring and then you're riding into well, you know what I mean, like in WWE, and I'm not bashing, but that's just the way it went. It just okay, we fight in the ring a little bit and then we shake hands, everybody sees us outside the ring and we're off and we're together. I mean, it's becoming,
and we're on Instagram together and everything else.
We're on Instagram together, holding, and it's coming back. Right. I think it's going full circle, which is great because, like, I don't know if I told you this. My grandson and I were at that show and he saw your eyeballs when they were that bright blue, and he's 11 years old and he was terrified. He's like, Pop, I don't want to go near that guy. I said, he ain't gonna do anything to you, buddy. You're with me. He ain't gonna come near you. Don't worry. He's not gonna hurt you. And he's like, okay, Pop, don't let him come near. Buddy, he won't. Don't worry.
I get a kick out of those stories. I love those. I make kids cry every month when I see them. That should be an insult to some people, but Johnny Valentine had a great quote, and you may have seen it before. I don't know, but he said, "I can't make you believe pro wrestling is real, but I can make you believe that I'm real." When people work with me and they're like, "We can throw this comedy spot," and I'm like, "I don't do comedy." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Did you ever see Brody do comedy? Have you ever seen Abdullah the Butcher or Harley Race do comedy?" I'm like, "No. I don't do comedy." And the whole idea behind Attila, even the name, I took Attila, Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan, two of the most violent, evil men in the history of the world, and I put them together. That's how we got Attila Khan. And the whole purpose behind that was to bring back that, and that's how I pitched it to Herb when I said, I don't look like the DI anymore. I don't move like the DI. I got too many pins, plates, and screws and surgeries, to do that. But I said, what I want to be just an absolute monster. I said, I want to be the one that people hate. I want the kids to cry. And I want to bring back that realistic, we know there's good guys, there's bad guys, but that guy scares me.
Yeah.
And that is the whole idea behind the character of Attila. That there's just no bottom to the depth that he will go to do something.
Yeah. I tell you, when I saw you, you reminded me of 1980s, probably 83, 84 in the AWA when they had the Sheiks, when they had Adnan Il-Casey, Crusher Blackwell, and Ken Patera. And you're like the combination of all three of those guys in one. You have that mean streak. You don't say nothing, but you have that mean streak and that look and that killer, I guess, killer instinct. And that's what I loved. I was like, man, if this was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, as a kid, I was just like, this is great. I loved it. And that's what it reminded me of. It brought me back to when I was a teenager. I felt like I was 13 or 14 years old again.
And that's the whole purpose.
Well, you did it. And I will say you did it. You've done it, I should say. And I'm so glad I'm close enough to where I can drive up there in the next few months and watch you guys again up in St. Louis. I'm so excited. And
we have some great stuff coming up this year.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about
stay tuned as well.
Okay, I'll take that.
Sure.
Bruiser Brody Memorial. We're going to talk. I want to talk to you a little bit about some other events, Dennis, outside of this. You were inducted with Herb in the Midwest Independent Wrestling Hall of Fame. What was that like for you?
Yes.
What was that like for you?
It very humbling because you're voted on by the prior inductees, so it's other workers, it's the boys that that have been in the business that have received that honor, and to be recognized, because honestly, I don't know if it sounds cliche or not. I mean, when I started in the business, I never dreamed that I would be a Hall of Famer, at the end of the deal, and I'm like, I just went out doing something I love to do and perform. And when I got the call and said, hey, you've been selected for this year, it was a unanimous vote. There was no dissension on any of the voting. It was 100% across the board. And we want to make you a member of the Hall of Fame. It was very humbling, and the opportunity to go with Herb, because like I said, Herb was there literally my first days in the business. So it was just I joked during the speech, I said, I guess if you stay around long enough, they think you know what you're doing. So, they recognize, but all joking aside, in Harley Race's Hall of Fame speech, he said, there's no greater place on the earth than under those lights. And I really can relate to that, because to be able to crawl through those ropes, come out that curtain, crawl through those ropes, and do something you absolutely love to do. And I've been blessed, like I said, I'm starting my 29th year. I've been doing this longer than most of the guys in the locker room have been alive. And some days it feels like it. Whew.
I was going to say, you probably take some bumps and bruises, and I'm sure you're in some pain after a match, with all those years, it takes a grind on you. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay,
it really does. I can tell you. I was going to say, just if you wanted to run down, I couldn't tell you how many concussions, broken noses. The nose has been rebuilt, 3 reconstructive shoulder surgeries. I have a total of 13 titanium anchors between my 2 shoulders, 8 in my left, 5 in my right. I have no labrum in the left shoulder anymore. The anchors hold it in. 2 years ago, went in, woke up, couldn't move. C2 through C7, and my neck was herniated. C5, C6, it exploded and was pinching into the nerves inside my spinal column. And so they removed a disc, 2 screws, a cadaver bone, and a titanium plate in my neck. And the doctor said, "You got any questions?" And I said, 2. I said, "How much of my beard are you going to cut off, and when can I get back in the ring?" And he said, "As little as possible in 6 months." I was back in 4 months. But yeah, people would be amazed what what your body goes through.
Yeah, I really think, especially now, I think people really don't. I think it's getting better, but I really think people think it's just all, it predetermined. But I'm also saying they don't think you're doing a lot of stuff in there, and you are. I mean, if you really go to a live match and you pay attention, and when you get whipped into those ropes, even getting whipped into the rope, your skin is getting, you can hear it, and you eventually build up a resistance callus, whatever you want to call it, to those because you whip into those ropes. You're leaving marks. You get hit on that mat. Yes, it bounces a little bit, but you're still feeling it. It's a lot of, and I'm just outside. I've never been in the ring as anything other than getting an hour. I've never been in there. You have, obviously. You tell us all these nooks and crannies and pains you've been through, and I applaud you for that, sir, because I'll tell you what, I mean, that's a lot of pain and still doing it. I'm going to say you must have one hell of a health insurance plan. Because
still doing it's pretty good. Yeah, it's I always tell people, I said, if you think it's easy, I said, come in here. I said, I'll pick you up over my head. I'm going to throw you down on your back. I said, if that doesn't hurt, tell me how you did it, because I'm going to start doing it your way, because you've now defied gravity. I want to know how you do that. And I've told people, hit the ropes. Inside those ropes is a steel cable. That's what's inside there is a steel cable. And you hit that full speed with your side and your back. I've seen guys that trainees the first time they hit the ropes and crumple right there on the first one, because it feels like it's 3 steel cables across your back.
Yeah.
And they're not expecting it. They're like, "Oh my God, what was that?" Welcome to wrestling.
Yeah.
It's not ballet.
No. And you got to learn how to fall correctly, slam correctly, land correctly, because if you don't, you're going to get hurt. And like Vern Gagne said, if you don't know how to land, if you don't know how to fall, you're not going to eat, because you're going to be hurt. And
that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I again, Dennis, I applaud you for 29 years of doing this, and all those surgeries and injuries you've had, and are still going. And I tell you, I saw you last September, early October in Las Vegas, and you look fantastic. I mean, for all the nicks and bruises, you look fantastic, and I'm looking forward to. I'm going to be up there in May. I won't bother you while you're Attila Khan. I'll get you during the day during the Bruiser Brody stuff, and we'll chat if you have time. So go ahead.
Go back to CAC.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. Yeah. I my wife and I have been talking
year?
about it right now. Yeah, we're talking about it. We want to. It's a month earlier, so we're trying to see if we can do. I think 99.9. We're probably going to be there. So yeah, definitely. Definitely be at the Bruiser Brody Memorial, though. I will be. She won't, but I will be. And one more question, I'll let you go. What are you up to now? Is there anything coming up in the next month or two for matches for you or events?
Sure. I'm going to be pretty busy. We're with SICW. We've got a big one coming up in March at the Shrine Mosque in East St. Louis. Tony Atlas will be there. Bob Orton will be there. February, we kick off our initial show at the Belclair Fairgrounds for our monthly house show that we're going to run, and that rolls into like you already mentioned, the Bruiser Brody in May. But in between now and in June, I'll be up for Austin Bayless up in Iowa, You'll probably see me back around with the Space Cowboy with this
Right.
company. You'll see me out with New Breed Wrestling with Scotty
Okay.
Z, and you'll see me with ACW out there with Searcher as well.
Good.
It's a busy schedule here over the next 6 months.
It sounds like exciting times too, and I'm so glad that these independents are really starting to come back and come back with some vengeance. And I'm so happy. Dennis McHawes, also the ring name Attila Khan. Thank you, sir, for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. And folks, I'll have his social media at SICW's New Breed, Mid States, all that information down in the description below. And one more time, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis McHawes, Attila Khan. Sir, thank you again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we will talk to you soon.